Hello guys, this is FIDE Master Viktor Neustroev, and now we start our webinar on the topic dynamic pawn sacrifice, where we are going to observe two games, and I also provide you two examples where one of the players sacrificed the pawn and got the initiative. Okay, hello everyone. This is FIDE Master Viktor Neustroev. Thank you for joining our today's webinar. It's about pawn sacrifice. So today the topic of the webinar is dynamic pawn sacrifice. You know, there is one more way to sacrifice the pawn. It's a positional pawn sacrifice. Okay, so please let me know what about the sound. If everything is perfect, you can see me, and I'm also sharing the board. Also, guys, where are you from? Okay, everything works fine. Okay, Jason is from Canada, perfect. Okay, before we start, I just want to give you some links. So this is the link to my profile. So you can add me to your friends list here on chess.com. Also, if you want, you can join our educational group here, Tricks of Chess. Okay, so new guys, Thomas from Slovenia. Okay, I think the sound is working. Please check it again. Okay, so this is our educational chess group. We also publish all the information about the tournament here. So join, please, if you want, of course. There will be some educational stuff, and of course all the pairings that we do. Also about the tournaments that we are conducting right now. For those who are participants, guys, I just want to remind you that today is the last game to play the game of the second round, and players who didn't play will get losses. The new pairings will be published on Monday about noon. No, it's my time, noon. So for United States, for example, it's about midnight. So midnight. No, I mean, night between Sunday and Monday. Okay, fine. So one more link for you to keep in mind. So this is my YouTube channel. So you may also subscribe to my YouTube channel if you don't want to miss any new videos, any webinars. And actually, I'm conducting a stream right now. So the stream of this webinar, it should be somewhere here. Anyway. Yeah, for example, yes, here it is, dynamic pawn sacrifice. For example, for example, Wenli Liu, if you can't hear me, you can just go to YouTube and check if you can hear me there. Okay, hello, William. Perfect. So we have 19 attendees. That's quite good. Guys, if you have any friends who wants to join the webinars, and these webinars are free, so everyone can join. You may invite this person, and it will be fine if he can join us. That's good. Okay, and we are going to talk about dynamic pawn sacrifices. Today we are going to analyze two games. One game is played by Bobby Fischer, and the second game played by Mikhail Tal. And then I also provide you with two examples when one of the sides sacrifices the pawn, but then gain the initiative. And your task will be to find when and how. Okay, so what do you know about pawn sacrifices? First, the main idea of a pawn sacrifice is to get some advantage and the initiative to gain more extra tempers, develop the pieces faster, and start the attack on the enemy king, for example, especially if it's in the center. Mainly for these purposes, we sacrifice the material. So sometimes we sacrifice the exchange, but it's very often when we sacrifice the pawn for initiative. Fine. There are several types of a pawn sacrifice. So, of course, the most popular one is to prevent his pieces development. Also, we can open the file, sacrifice the pawn, just to get rid of the pawn, to open the file to attack the enemy king. No, anyway, so the idea of such a pawn sacrifice is to make the position sharper and force your opponent to defend, because it's really difficult to defend the position. And if it's a classical long game, then, or even if it's a blitz, then the other side who defends the position can often makes a mistake, even if it's a grandmaster playing. Okay, fine. So let's start with this game between Bobby Fischer and Bent Larsen. It was French defense played, so e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, bishop b4. This line is called Winava variation. So I hope you can see the screen. So, okay, a good question from Marcel. Pawn sacrifice or gambit? So gambit is the opening. However, you can sacrifice the pawn in any stage of the game. So you can sacrifice it in opening stage or in the middle game or even in the end game. If you sacrifice it in opening, then it may be called a gambit. But if you sacrifice it in the middle game, it's not a gambit, it's just a pawn sacrifice. A gambit is the name of the opening in which you sacrifice the pawn, or your opponent, for example, sacrifices the pawn. So that's why if we sacrifice the pawn in the middle game, we can hardly call it a gambit, just a pawn sacrifice. Okay, so this line is called Winava variation. What was played? e5, of course. c5, here is the main move. However, knight e7 can be played as well. It leads to just a different move order, to the same position with a different move order. a3, bishop takes e3, b takes e3, and c5. What do you think, guys? Oh, actually, it's shown with the arrow. So the best move in this position is queen g4. However, this game was quite an old game. Yeah, so queen g4. No, the idea of this line is that we capture the g7, then the h7, he takes here, and we can't really take, because if so, queen c3, and we blunder a rook. So that's why in this position we should play knight e2 move. Then he can play either knight bc6 or d takes c3. Let's say this move. Then we play f4, d takes c3. In this position, queen d3 is the most popular move. However, I prefer to play h4, the second popular move, with the idea to play h5. Then queen retreats, and then after h6, h7, we tie down the enemy rook to our pawn, and yes, we may have a temporary material advantage. So because the rook can't participate the game. However, our king is in trouble in such a case, and of course the position is too complicated and really sharp. However, I prefer to play it for white. And this is what I also recommend to my students. What was played in this game? In this game, a4. This move exists, but is not considered a strong move, and white can equalize the position. Knight bc6, knight f3, and Larsen played bishop d7, which is not the best option. Queen e5 is considered to be the best move, and then white may continue with bishop d2 or maybe queen d2. And finally, somewhere there, black is able to equalize the position. However, I don't know why, but bishop d7 was played. Maybe he prepared this line. So here white has several moves. Bishop e2, for example, bishop a3, bishop b5. But in that game, it was played bishop d3. So again, in this position, either c4 or queen a5 makes sense. For example, c4, bishop e2, and queen e5. And then white has to play either queen d2 or bishop d2. In this position, I believe queen d2 looks better because the bishop can be activated to a3. That's the main idea of a4 move, actually. If not c4, then queen e5 looks good. Then, for example, white castles. So, and if black captures the pawn, then this is actually poisoned pawn. Bishop d2, queen b2, d takes c5 with the idea to play rook b1 and take on b7, but he captures on e5, so we can't play rook b1 right now because he takes on f3. Well, this is what actually we should do, but the queen is able to escape. Queen f3, queen goes to f6, for example, then let's trade the queens, capture on b7. This is how we equalize the material. He may also capture on a4, but after rook a1, we take on a7 and get the advantage of a bishop pair. And of course, the initiative, because our rooks, at least one of our rooks, will be located on the 7th rank. And the c5 pawn can be a strong pawn. So c4, bishop e2, if he doesn't take the pawn, plays a different move, then queen d2 can be played probably. Okay, let's go back. So neither c4 nor queen a5 was played. Queen c7. Castle, c4. Now, bishop e2. So you see now black doesn't really want to attack the d4 pawn. This is one of the typical ideas of French defense. So if there is no way to attack the pawn on d4, what do you think black should do? What other plan black should choose? To free up the bishop, the light-scored bishop. So a light-scored bishop for black is the main problem. And if, for example, black can somehow get rid of these bishops, I would say that black is even better in this position. However, it's very often when they can't and the bishop is really bad. However, white tries to compensate this bishop with the other pieces activity. So castle queen side, I don't think makes sense right now, but of course, black keeps this move in mind. So yeah, of course, castle king side right now is okay, but f6, attack f5 with f6. Yeah, so two players suggested this move f6. So when you can't attack d4, you should play f6 and attack e5. However, in this position, Bobby Fischer plays the best move, rook e1. What's the idea? Of course, he can't take. If, for example, he takes here, then we can either take with our knight or pawn. For example, pawn takes. And after knight e5, knight e5, queen e5, we have bishop h5 with a discovered attack. So this is how he loses the queen. If, for example, no, let's say here, not knight takes, but pawn takes. And for example, if he doesn't take but plays castle queen side, now the pawn may be hanging. Yeah, I think it's hanging because there is no good move with a discovered attack. No, I'm talking about this line with queen e5, with knight e5, knight takes e5, queen takes e5. So maybe bishop c4, but then maybe queen c3. So it's not in white favor. What do you think? How white should play in this position? Rook b1? How does rook b1 help? Okay, bishop f4 or bishop f1. Any other suggestions? Knight d4. William, what's the idea of knight d4? What did you prepare for knight takes e5? Knight b5? Okay, okay, knight d4. Let me draw the arrows. Knight d4, knight takes e5, then you play knight b5. Okay, fine. Then I can play queen b8. Not queen b8, but let me take. A takes b5. Then maybe just king b8 move. Maybe, okay, maybe king b8. Yeah, why not? Maybe not king b8, but b6. Knight g5 looks knight e5. Okay, knight g5. No, I don't think so. At least rook df8. Or maybe knight e5 first, because when the knight is on e5, it also protects the f7. Okay, so actually, knight d4 deserves attention here. Why? Because if knight e5 is played, then we have bishop f4. For example, bishop f4, to get rid of this pin, he has to sacrifice the knight here, then he takes, but then knight e6. So we gain the pawn back and slightly ruin his position. Maybe it's not the best solution. Maybe William was right about knight b5, because if bishop takes, a takes, and then let's say b6, then I think bishop f4 is even stronger. And if now knight f3, so bishop f3, the pawn on a7 is hanging, and then the king will be in trouble. However, in this position, knight g6 can be played, knight e7 g6, then bishop g3, and now knight f3 won't work, but white can put the pressure on this knight and probably gain it for free with, for example, bishop h5, with the idea to take on g6 and then take on e5. It's difficult to find anything that could help. For example, rook here, bishop h5, rook f5, bishop g6. No, not bishop g6. Bishop g4. If, yeah, that works better. If rook g5, then bishop e6, check, and then f4, right? Bishop e6 and then f4, fork. And if rook retreats, then just queen d4 is fine. Yeah, that works. White is winning. So actually, William was right. Okay, here, not knight. Yeah, wait. Knight d4, knight f5, bishop here, knight f3, bishop f3. Rook takes, not knight takes, but rook takes on e6. No, I don't think it makes sense. because if bishop takes on e6, knight takes e6, and yes, this is a fork, but queen goes here, knight d8. So you see, we traded our active rook for that passive rook. Also, the bishop was a bad piece, while our knight was good. So we traded anyway, but the rook on e6 was more active than the rook on h8. I don't think this is a good idea. So, but I think after he castles queenside, the best continuation. Oh, wait, not here, but in this position. No, sorry. He takes, we take. And in this position, after he castles, queenside, bishop a3 was the best continuation because he can't capture, the e7 is hanging. And we are going to play bishop d6. The bishop gets to a perfect position, and the pawn on e5 will be protected. We can also do the same thing in case if he castles. So the knight is hanging again. Actually, that's the main idea of a4 move. That's why in this position he didn't take. Maybe he'd better castle first. However, he played this move. That can be considered as an accuracy here. And bishop a3 with the initiative, but this move sacrifices the pawn. F takes e5. Oh, d takes e5. In this position, instead of taking the pawn immediately, we could analyze knight g5 option. But this move is faced with either e4 or h6 or even queen d8. So I don't think it deserves our attention. So bishop a3, we sacrifice, d takes e5, then knight takes e5, knight takes. If here queen takes on e5, we play bishop c4, queen retreats, even to c3. And then what do you think? Should we capture with our bishop or with our queen? What is better? What do you think? With the bishop, with the queen? Okay, I am waiting for more replies. With the bishop. Okay, so Anirudh suggested queen, and then he suggested bishop. Activate the queen. Actually, guys, you are mistaken. If you do this move, then you blunder something. Try to notice what did you blunder. It's not the c2 pawn, of course. If you take on c2, then rook e6 and white wins. No, not bishop c6 because of queen e6. Yeah, but the queen takes to a1. Queen takes a1, the rook is hanging, rook e6 cannot be played, queen e6 doesn't make any sense. So the best move is to take, no, because if rook captures queen, then white loses his queen. So that's why let's lose the queen for at least a bishop. But this position is, of course, in black favor. Maybe not a winning position for black, but definitely in black favor. So that's why instead of queen takes, then bishop takes, and it's fine. So for example, castle and rook a3 with a strong attack. Now, of course, he took with the other knight. How would you continue in this position? Okay, f4 is one of the suggestions, queen d4. Okay, while you are typing, let's also analyze where. So bishop d5, he castles, and then here I suggested rook e3, but wait, when to take the queen? Okay, Wenli, what position are you talking exactly? So if here, yes, here, yes, it's better to take on e6, I think. King c7 and then rook a1. Yes, it's slightly better than what I demonstrated before. Okay, so let's now go back here, knight e5, and you suggested f4 or queen d4. Yeah, queen d4 is a better option because if f4, then knight comes to c6. How to continue? Let's say maybe this move. But if so, he just castles queenside, and he really likes to trade this bishop because then he captures the f4 pawn. So here white is a pawn down, and looks like the position is too simple with just a few pieces left. So there is no initiative for white at all. But queen d4 is the better option. It also attacks the g7 square. So what to do in this position for black? He can't castle kingside because of the bishop on a3, but he may castle queenside. If so, then queen a7 looks good. Knight c6, queen e8 check. Now maybe queen e3 in this position is fine and white is better. But even queen e8 is fine. Queen e8, queen b8, queen takes b8, king takes b8, bishop d6 check, king a7, and then f4 to control e5, then to relocate the bishop to f3. So the e6 is a weak now. So you see bishop e8, for example, doesn't work in this position. Just bishop c5 check, king b8, and then bishop to b6 or bishop to g4. No, I think bishop g4 makes sense. Then e6 is hanging. Okay, fine. So that's why in this position he played knight g6. Bishop h5 to pin. And in this position, I believe the best move that he could play was to castle queenside. And after queen a7, b6, queen checks. Let's trade. And then here bishop d6 doesn't work, but a5 provides white with the huge initiative, even without queens on the board. For example, b takes a5, bishop d6, king comes to, I don't know, b7, maybe a7, let's say b7, bishop g6, h takes g6, and rook a5, with the idea to double the rooks, so maybe just to get the other rook to the b file. For example, if rook e8, rook c5 can be played, and then the other rook joins. Rook c7 is also threatening. So for example, this move is a critical mistake. Then rook b1, king to a6. And what is the final move? How to play for white in this position to be able to gain the material? Bishop c7, rook a1. No, rook a1, king b6. That's why bishop c7 was the idea to play rook a5. What can he do now? Of course, he can sacrifice the exchange, but then white is winning. He can also play this move. And then, for example, rook cb5, rook c7, rook b4, rook b2, with the idea to deliver a checkmate. Because if something like rook c5 is played, it doesn't really help. We just do this, he blocks, we take, and then we play rook a1, so we win a rook. So you see, a5 provides white with a real initiative here. That's why to castle queenside was, of course, possible, especially comparing to what black did, because black played king f7 move, which is actually a mistake, because then you'll see how Bobby Fischer successfully won the game. So he played f4, and after this move, it's obvious that white is much, much better. White is about to play f5. f5 also helps to gain the d5 pawn and to play rook e7 check and then win the game. Rook h to e8. f5 anyway. He takes on f5. He has no other choice, otherwise he loses the bishop. Queen takes d5, and for example, in this position, bishop e6 is a mistake. Please tell me why this is a bad move and how white wins now. What do you think? Sorry. And for people who just joined us recently, my name is Viktor Neustroev. I'm a FIDE master from Russia, and currently my rating is 2252. It was 2305, but I slightly decreased it. Okay, so rook e6, rook takes e6, and queen f5. That's right. However, it's not the end. Rook e6, rook takes e6, queen takes f5. If he moves the king, he loses his rook, and then is a piece down. If he plays this move, then we play queen d5, check again, and after king goes to e8, we just play rook e1, what leads to a checkmate, I think. Yeah, to a checkmate, right? If he doesn't play this move, the only other move he has is to block with a rook. Then rook f1, and after king retreats, so either g8 or e8, we capture the rook. And then we will be playing with extra piece. So that's why this move doesn't work. He can also block with his rook. If so, we play queen f5 immediately, rook f6, and then we play rook e7 and take the d7 bishop. That's why in this position, if he can't block, he should move to f6. This is what exactly happened in the game. And this is where Bobby Fischer made a mistake. He decided to play bishop f3. What do you think he could play in this position instead? How to win this position in the most simple way? Bishop d6? Okay, bishop d6, what's the idea? Or what if queen b6 check after that? Okay, so g4 of course looks natural. However, you want to take g4, maybe knight f4. Bishop e7, rook takes e7. What's the idea of this move? I don't understand. Then rook takes and queen takes. Sorry, not queen, but king takes. And if you do rook check. Then I can just go back to f6 or maybe to f8. Should be fine. Bishop c5, of course, bishop c5 makes sense too, but actually bishop d6. As for g4 move, maybe queen c6 is fine. Or king g5 immediately. Okay, so definitely it's not the move that deserves attention here, but bishop d6. Queen checks, bishop c5. And then the bishop is relocated to d4. For example, queen c6. Queen d4. This is one more way. And after king moves, just bishop f3, bishop to d5. So for example, here the queen moves to c8. Then we take on e8. Queen takes on e8. And queen d5 check. If he plays bishop e6, then we take on b7 and then his rook. If he plays queen e6, then we take on b7 immediately and then try to use the pin with this move or this pin with bishop d5. If he goes with the king, then queen d6, he goes here, then this move, he goes here, bishop d4, king, okay, and then rook e1. And the bishop e6, just anything, including bishop d5. Okay, so it's fine. However, bishop d4 wasn't played in the game, bishop d6, I mean. Instead, it was bishop f3. Knight e5, queen d4 to pin that knight. King g6, which is maybe not the best choice, but then a rook e5. So here he can take his queen only, because if he do this move, if he does this capture with the rook, then bishop d6, of course. So queen takes, but after this queen takes, we capture on d7. And we have two bishops for a rook, but we are down one pawn, and he takes the other one on c3. For example, if queen c3 in this position, then queen d6 check, king to g5, h4 check, and the king has to take, but then queen f4 checkmates. So he can't take right now. That's why instead of taking on c3, he plays rook a d8, queen takes b7, and now he plays queen e3. Oh, you see, if we go to h1, we blunder a back rank mate. That's why we go here and rook d2. How to continue for white in this position? What do you think? Queen c6. And what queen c6 does? So queen c6, and if king f7, then what do you suggest? No, queen c6 definitely deserves attention, but how to deal with king f7 move? Bishop d5. Yes, I agree with you. Bishop d5, and then he has to take this bishop. Queen takes d5. It's still a check, and he's not threatening with a checkmate. we may get our queen back to f3. This is how we defend against checkmate and also get extra piece, extra bishop on a3. But it's obvious that after queen c6, he's gonna play rook e6 move, and then how to continue. Oh, bishop h5. What does bishop h5 gives us? It's only a bishop sacrifice. Of course, you may play queen f3 after that, but if so, you will be down the exchange. Moreover, he may ignore it and just move the king to h6. But you can still play queen f3. Okay. So, okay, if I'll show you queen c6, rook e6, and if bishop h6, h5 after that, he just takes, and queen f3 doesn't really help to save, for example, and then rook here, and the game is over. Black is winning. Too much material advantage. So how to continue in this position? Queen c5, queen c5, queen c5. No. If queen c5, okay, please tell me how now black wins after queen c5 move. No, yes. So guys, you're right. So bishop to c5 is the best option, because if queen c5 is played, then rook f2, king moves to g1, and then just rook captures on f3, a discovery check. And so this is how black just gains the bishop. So queen takes queen, then this rook takes, and extra exchange, and absolutely winning position for black. But bishop c5 works. And if then he does rook f2, king goes to g1. If he takes rook f3, he loses his queen. That's why he takes on g2. King takes on g2. Queen d2 to save the queen. King goes to h1, and the rook c6, bishop takes c6. Queen takes c3. Rook g1, king f6, and let's now calculate the material. We have rook plus two bishops for the queen, and two pawns, g7 and f5. So I would say it can be a winning position if not the king, which is really weak in this position. And that's why I would say that white is just slightly better. Not really much, but slightly. However, yeah, it's almost equal. However, if black makes a mistake, or if any side makes a mistake, the other side gets a huge advantage, because the position is really sharp and it's difficult to calculate the lines in such a sharp position. Okay, so bishop a7 was played. This is where black had several options, and maybe to take on c2 was the best one. King c2, a5, but then maybe queen d3 and try to promote. But instead, black decided to play g5, and this move is considered a tempo loss. Bishop b6, queen c2, a5 now. Queen b2 to stop a6 move. The bishop will be hanging in such a case. But bishop d8 check, king e6 and a6. And now another mistake. So probably queen f2 could give us some, could give black some practical chances for a draw, but bishop g5, and of course it's difficult to play. However, it was played queen a3, bishop b7, with the idea to play bishop b6 and a7, a8, or just to distract the queen and then a7, a8. And another blunder, this move, queen c5, rook b1, threatening with bishop b6, and after that the game is over. I don't know what Bent Lasser was thinking about in this position when he played queen c5. Maybe he analyzed, maybe he had lack of time or something like that, but he played c3, the move that doesn't really help, because after this move, the game is just over, just rook e1 check. No, c2, rook a1 check. If king moves, he loses the queen in the game. If queen e5, then he loses two, because we do this move. This is a check. King has to take, and then just bishop e3 stops the pawn, while we can promote the a6 pawn with no problems at all. If he does queen c4, what also looks logical in this position, then just a7, c2 now, still rook e1 check. Let's say king moves, doesn't really matter where, a8 equals queen, and after c1 equals queen, white of course has a checkmate. It's a fourth line of a checkmate, but even if white doesn't want to calculate any lines, he may capture on c1, then queen c1, and play bishop g1 and just win this position with two extra bishops against two pawns. It will be easier to trade the queens in this position and then just finish the game. So fine. Actually, after bishop b6, Bent Larsen resigned. However, I don't think that this is the best game played by Bobby Fischer, because he didn't realize his advantage when he played bishop f3 move instead of bishop d6 and bishop c5. So, but let's go back to the critical moment of this game, when he decided to sacrifice the pawn. So in this position, he played bishop a3 move to prevent black from castling. At the same time, he understood that if black takes, and then, for example, castles after queen d4, castles queen side, then he loses on a7 too. And of course, white gets a strong counterplay through the e-file. I don't know exactly what lines Bobby calculated, but of course the position is much better. No, I believe if a computer, for example, Stockfish, were playing with black pieces here, he was able to defend the position even against Bobby Fischer, Magnus Carlsen, Garry Kasparov. However, when humans are playing, it's practically quite difficult to defend this position, especially against such a strong player like Bobby Fischer. Okay, fine. So this game is over. Now the second game. As for the second game, it's the game between Mikhail Tal, Soviet Grandmaster, and a strong international master from Germany, if I'm not mistaken. Wait a sec, let me find where okay, here it is. Okay, so it's Dieter Morlock. In this position, Mikhail Tal was playing with white pieces. So, you know, he was a really good tactic, and sometimes he played by intuition. When a normal player can't calculate the line, he used his intuition and almost always was correct. And this game actually illustrates a line dynamic pawn sacrifice. When we sacrifice the pawn to open the line, the file to attack the enemy king. It was Sicilian, e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, c takes d4. So knight f6, knight c3, d6, bishop g5, rouser attack, e6, queen d2, bishop e7, castle, and here f4 is the main move, and this is what you guys saw in our previous webinar. It was the game between Spassky and Petrosyan was playing with black pieces. Spassky was white here, and he successfully defeated Petrosyan. But f4 wasn't played in this game. Here, knight b3. It's a typical move for Sicilian lines, but at the same time, usually it's considered that the knight on b3 is not in a good position, and we remove the knight to avoid all the complications in the center. As for this position, I think this move was played to stop d5 move from black. Queen b6, f3. f3, the idea of this move is to start a kingside attack, kingside pawn march, g4, h4, and so on. a6, g4, rook d8. And if, for example, h4 is played, then what do we expect from black? What do you think? What do you mean h3? h6 you mean? I believe h6 is only helps white to open the file. So yeah, okay, if h6, then I think bishop e3 is fine. And then after g5, h takes g5, h takes g5, the h file is open, what allows us to get the queen to h2 and checkmate. So h6 will be a critical mistake. And guys, actually, when you are under the pawn march, so when you are defending against the pawn march onto your king, please keep your pawns on their initial positions until the other side reaches the sixth rank. So you should keep the pawn as they are and wait until one of his pawns reaches the sixth rank. Then you should try to block the pawn structure. That's the idea. Okay, so yes, in this position, I think Aniano is correct. He suggests that d5 should be played. That's true. E takes d5, knight takes d5. And if knight takes d5, yeah, so if bishop is7 here, then knight c takes. And it looks fine. If knight d5, then rook takes d5. Bishop d3 maybe, but knight e5, and the position is approximately equal. Bishop e7 doesn't gain a piece because after knight d3, she takes d3, queen c7, and bishop c5, b6 can be played, so black is able to get the piece back. But I think the position will be equal, even without so many minor pieces. Okay, so that's why in this position, before playing this move, before playing h4, bishop e3 is played. Bishop e3, queen moves, queen was under attack, and then g5, so to prevent d5. When we are attacking our opponent on this side, we shouldn't allow him to open the center, because if only we do that, he may get a counterplay in the center. This is the first thing that we should keep in mind. The other thing is that when the center is open, it's easy to trade the pieces, especially when we trade our pieces that participate into the attack, so that we won't have enough material to checkmate. And if so, then this attack wouldn't make any sense. And of course, it's much easier to join the pieces through the center to the king side to defend the king. So that's why don't open the king. Why maybe you know, guys who attended our first webinars, there was a webinar that was called the role of the center in flank attacks. The idea was that you should keep the center stable with no counterplay for your opponent, and only if you do this, you can succeed in your kingside attack, especially if you're castle to the same side. Okay, so where does he go? What can you say about knight h5 move? Is it good or not? And how to play them? Yeah, so the advantage of this move is that it blocks the h pawn. The disadvantage is, of course, that it's the object of the attack. And yes, it's almost trapped. That's why in this position, either bishop e2 or f4. And if here he plays d5, he just blunders on d5. We take, e takes, knight takes, then what? He has to sacrifice the rook. Then, of course, he may capture on... No, he can't. If he does this move, then queen e4. Even if he plays bishop e6, then still queen e4, and there is no compensation for the exchange sacrificed on d5. He is also one pawn down. But of course, it's not obligatory for black to open the position. He may play just an ordinary move like b5. If so, bishop e2, and then this knight is the object of the attack. And even b4 doesn't help, because after b4, a knight comes to a4. So g6, bishop h5, g takes h5, and for example, one of the most simple moves is queen e2, b4, knight a4. So bishop b6 is coming, the h5 is hanging, of course white is better. That's why he didn't play knight h5, he played knight d7. However, I want you to remember that the main idea when the knight comes to h5 and blocks your pawn march is to attack this knight either with your bishop or knight. So knight d7, h4, b5. How to continue for white? What do you think? If you're white, what would you do? Would you play with your h pawn to h5, what looks quite logical, or maybe you should prevent the enemy attack, so do something on the queen side first, maybe king b1 kind of prophylaxis, maybe a3, or what? So Anirudh suggested h5, and what can you say about b4? Knight e2. No, I think knight a4 is better. Okay, any other suggestions? h5, b4, knight e2, a5, g6. Yes, Jason, I would agree with you, but instead of knight e2, I would play knight a4. Because I don't know what black can do to be able to attack my knight on a4. Because maybe knight c5, however. No, I don't think it works. Okay, fine. So, of course, h5 is definitely the best move, and this is what computer thinks. And I believe this is what everyone, almost everyone, would play in this position. So h5, b4, knight comes to a4 is the best move. Then he does knight c5 to get rid of the knight, because when we capture on c5, d takes c5, attacking our queen, but queen f2, or queen f2. He takes on d1, king takes on d1, queen d8, king goes back, bishop c5, but bishop g5, sorry, but then f4. So we don't trade the material. We'd better keep more material on the board. Bishop comes to h6, and then I don't know if we should take, or maybe we'd better first play e5, or maybe rook g1. Maybe rook g1 is better because we take the c5 pawn anyway. And then we can continue the attack. However, in this position, probably Mikhail Tal didn't really enjoy the h5 line, and he decided to sacrifice the pawn. He played g6. Of course, if black plays properly, then he can try to defend this position, of course, sure. So what's the idea? Oh, this move is played to open the files. So for example, what can be done? H takes g6. H takes g6, of course, h5 to open the h file. In the game, it was, if he ignores, we just take one of the pawns and open the files. If f takes, then still h5. And this position, for example, b4 was a mistake. If b4 is played, how would you continue? What do you think? Knight a4, h takes g6. Okay, and Thomas, no, not, so maybe I'm, okay, maybe I'm not reading properly. So how to pronounce Tomasz or Thomas? Tomasz Kolmanic. Am I right? Tomasz Kolmanic. Yeah, perfect. So knight d5. Oh, and what if he takes on d5? Queen takes. Uh-huh. And after king f8, for example? No, actually, it's right. Absolutely correct. So knight d5. E takes d5, queen takes d5. Check. He has two moves. To the king to f8 or the king to h8. If he does king f8, then the most simple move in this position is bishop c4. So you see, we're threatening with two checkmates, queen f7, queen g8, and of course he can't defend against both of them. But if he does king to h8, then of course h captures on g7 with the idea to take on g7. So for example, if knight f6 in this position, then rook h7, knight h7, and queen h5, then we deliver a checkmate. So, sorry. Of course, queen takes on h7, king f8, and then queen h8. And if h6, then bishop takes h6, what also leads to a checkmate, for example, like that. Fine. So let's go back. Yeah, knight d5 could be a good move. So you see, b4 doesn't make sense because we move the knight with a tempo, and if he continues with queen b8, we just continue the attack with either knight d4, h takes g6, or anything. Maybe knight d4 looks better because this is how we distract the knight. So he takes on d4, and knight e7, king f8. Then bishop d4, and after he takes, we join the queen to the attack. I don't know, maybe bishop g7 is good first, and then queen g5. Yeah, I think it's better. D takes h5 was played in this position. Rook takes h5, and of course, if b4, then still knight d5 works. If king f8, we know how to play. It's bishop c4. If king h8, then how would you play? Rook h7. So here David is correct. Then queen h5, and after king g8, just bishop c4, what also leads to checkmate. Fine. Rook h5, knight f6. Rook g5. Knight e5. Queen goes to g2 to put some pressure on g7. Bishop f8. So this position is approximately equal. However, I believe white has a strong plan to attack on the king side. But it's not obvious what move to may play first, so that's why white decides just to continue with bishop e2, maybe with the idea to join the other rook to the attack. Also keeping in mind the idea to play f4. Knight c4. Bishop takes e4, b takes c4. So maybe knight d2 was a better option in this position. However, I think knight d4 also makes sense. Knight tries to join the attack. And finally, this knight really helped. So rook b8. If you are under attack on one side, but your opponent is castled to the opposite side, then the best way to succeed is to start your own queenside attack. This is what exactly black did. He decided to play rook b8 to attack the b2. So here I think rook g1 was a better choice, but rook h1 was played. Rook b7. No, this move has two ideas. First, to double, and second, to protect g7 and all this 7th rank. White plays rook h6 with the idea to take the knight. And in this position, king f7 was played. However, the other option was g6. If g6, how would you play? What do you think? Does it make sense to sacrifice? And if sacrifice, then which rook to take with? Okay, so you all want to sacrifice. Okay, let's say with this rook. And then after pawn takes, do you think queen takes or the other rook takes? Rook takes. Okay, so yeah, queen g6 doesn't make sense because then he plays bishop g7, but rook g6. If bishop here blocks, then I think after rook f6 we have enough material advantage. We are down the exchange, but one pawn as a compensation. However, e6 is hanging, and maybe bishop h6 can be played then. Or maybe bishop h6. No, now it's too early to play bishop h6. So king f7 is the best option. If so, then we continue with queen g5, putting more pressure. So bishop e7 won't work because of if bishop e7, then I think rook g7 works. And after king e8, queen checks, and after king g7, just queen takes f6. So knight h7, for example. But if knight h7, then we play this move. He does knight f6 back. We take, king takes, and how to continue in this position? What do you think? There is only one move that leads to a checkmate. Bishop g5, king to g7. Queen h6, king g8. e5 when? e5 right now or what? If e5 right now, then d captures e5. If you were suggesting knight e4, then king g7. Okay, guys, so none of these lines that you suggested works. So, for example, this move. And if king goes here, queen h6, king g8, the queen is hanging, he may do this move, but then just bishop g7. And after this, he takes knight e6. Doesn't really work. So let's say this rook f7. So white is down a rook. No, it doesn't work. If not bishop g5, but e5, then d captures. Knight e4 check, king g7, bishop h6. King where? If king g8, then knight f6, of course. So king goes here. The best move that I see is bishop f8, but then queen blocks. And I don't know how to play to continue, or maybe there's only this option. King goes, no, rook g7, because if king here, then knight f6. But after rook g7 and bishop takes, queen g7, I think it's fine. And maybe the best way for white is just to repeat and keep checking the king with queen h2, queen e5. No, it doesn't work. Knight d5 doesn't work as well, but knight f5 here leads to a checkmate. For example, how to continue? Well, bishop g5 is coming. Bishop g5, king goes to e4, and then, for example, queen h2. This is a checkmate. What he can do in this position? He may play e takes f5, knight d5 check, where he goes. If he goes to e5, then f4. If king f4, then queen h1 is a checkmate. If king e6, then queen f5 is a checkmate. So that's why here he may also play king e6 or king g7. If king e6, then queen e5, of course. King g7 is the only other move. If so, bishop d4, another check. He goes to g8. This is the only spot. Knight f6, the only square is this, and then queen h7 is a checkmate. So you see, we just checkmated him with just a few pieces. Yeah, I never would have found that. Yeah, it's difficult to find, of course. So knight f5 was quite a clever move that leads to a checkmate. Yeah, maybe in a classical game I would find it. In Blitz, I think no, but I can just use my intuition and play this move. I was not sure if Mikhail Tal calculated the line properly, but I think he prepared something for g6, or maybe he decided to uh, trust his intuition. So king f7 was played instead. Then rook h4, queen b6 with the idea to attack on b2 but knight d1, queen c7 back. Looks like he just lost the temper. f4. So the idea of f4 is to start to play f5 or e5. h6, but that wasn't a clever move, just rook g6. And after rook g6, instead of trying to escape with the king, like king e8, he plays rook e8, another blunder, and then f5, opening the position. And here, of course, he should take. Of course, he takes f5, he takes f5, then keep playing this position. But of course, queen d5 may be played after rook sacrifices on f6. However, black played e5. Knight goes to c3 back, and if no queen d8 was played in the game, but if e takes d4, then rook f6, and if king f6 or even g takes f6, knight d5. So if the king is on f6, it's a check and we gain a queen. But if pawn takes on f6, we are threatening the queen and the checkmate with queen g6. That's why in this position he didn't take on d4, he played queen d8 move, but it didn't help. What do you think? What's the last move? Okay, so that those of you who want to analyze this game, I'm going to publish it on chess.com, I think tomorrow. And the name of a black player is Dieter Morlock. Rook g7, rook g7, bishop takes g7. Queen g6, king g8, or f8. I don't know. Okay, so knight c6. Tomasz, what's your FIDE rating? So knight c6, and then he resigned. Why? Because it's difficult to find a move for his queen. For example, queen c7. Rook takes f6. If king takes f6, it's a checkmate. If g takes x, it doesn't really matter. It's checkmate anyway, because this is how we not only attack the queen, but also cover the e7 square. Okay, 1800. I see. Okay, so that was an example of a pawn sacrifice. So keep this tactical idea in mind. So you see, a normal player would play h5, and this is generally a good move. But Mikhail Tal played the g6, sacrificed the pawn with the idea to open the h file. Okay, so we are over with this game, and you know, guys, I prepared 2 exercises for you. Okay, just wait a sec, I'm loading it. So in this game, white played knight c3. Let's make this move on the board. What did he have in mind? And did he blunder a pawn, or he was prepared for this pawn sacrifice? What do you think? So first, let's find how black can gain a pawn in this position, and then let's analyze the consequences of this pawn sacrifice. Yeah, it's definitely bishop f2, queen c4. So bishop takes on f2, then queen c4. But did white blunder, or he prepared something for bishop f2 move? What do you think is the idea of white? First of all, I want to tell that this is the game. This is a fragment from the game between 2 grandmasters. Rook f6, bishop f2, queen c4, rook f6, bishop h6. Yeah, that's right. Okay, it's a rook f2, queen c4, or rook f6, g takes f6, bishop h6. So he gains the exchange back at least. If, for example, rook e8, then we may continue with knight e4, threatening to do this, or somehow get our queen to that side. If, for example, he plays queen c5, we just play e3, what allows us to get the queen to g4 much faster. If knight d7, it's still knight e4 with a strong attack. The rook is hanging, so we can also try to join even the other rook to the attack, or just play e3 and get the queen to g4. So, of course, when we sacrifice the pawn in a dynamic position, we don't really need to calculate everything to the very end. Our task is just to understand that we have a strong initiative and our opponent has to defend for at least 7 to 10 moves. Fine. One more example for you. Actually, I think I like the second example more. So I think it's obvious that the c3 is hanging. So bishop c3, pawn takes c3, queen takes c3. So the pawn is hanging. And in this position, white castle. Why did he sacrifice on c3? What was his idea? Okay, so bishop c3, well, let's say bishop c3, b takes c3, queen c3, and you think that knight e6? What? Rook d8? What do you mean? Bishop is supporting the queen, but there is a rook on the a file. Knight f5, what's the idea of knight f5? William, would you like to sacrifice the queen? Okay, guys, I just don't understand. Knight e6, bishop e6, what's the idea? Sacrifice the queen on d8? So you see, even the computer doesn't want to make this move. Rook takes and that's it. Wait a sec. So knight e6, bishop e6, queen d8, sorry. Queen d8, rook takes d8, and that's it. So yes, so who was right in this position? So only knight f5 is a correct move here. Knight f5, and what can he do? First, this move starts a strong attack. We only sacrifice one pawn, but we are threatening with many threats, like knight d6, knight g7, queen d6 as well. What can he do? For example, if he captures what is the main line, then we deliver a check. I don't think that knight g7 works in this position because we can just capture on e7 with our rook. And after knight takes, queen takes here, king f8. And after bishop e7, we're definitely winning here with two bishops against a rook and a strong attack, of course. If instead he does a king move, then we can still play queen. Oh, we can actually capture on d7 immediately. I think this is even better. So we gain a piece back and continue our strong attack, threatening to play queen d6. Fine. So rook e1, bishop e6 is the other move that we should analyze. If so, we may continue with queen d6. No concrete threats, but maybe rook e6 makes sense. Rook e6 sacrifice, or maybe rook a d1. So anyway, a6, bishop d2. Queen takes on c2. Bishop b4, threatening a checkmate on, no, it's almost a checkmate on f8. And if, for example, a takes b5, queen f8, check. King goes to d7, then a rook goes to d1, king c7, then we take the rook. And in this position, he can't do anything. If, for example, he captures on b4, he gets this move. Well, let's do this. I don't know actually what to play because queen a4, queen d8. Okay, let's checkmate instead. Queen d8, king c6, queen d6. I think it's better than gain a queen. So if he doesn't take, if, for example, he plays queen c5, then we can take on g7. This is the only move. And then queen h5. What's the idea of this move? If he takes, then something like bishop h6, and then the queen is hanging. So queen c2 to move the queen out of the fifth rank. Then rook a d1, and if he tries to trade the queens, then rook d7, he takes here, queen h4. So we keep more pieces on the board. So we are just one pawn down, but you see how strong our attack is. Then bishop c1, and then bishop comes to b2. So the idea of dynamic pawn sacrifice is that we don't really see a victory. He can play several moves, but for almost every possible move, for his position, we have a good way, a good response that also continues our attack and force our opponent to defend. That's the idea of dynamic pawn sacrifice. And this is what White had in mind playing castle king side. And in the game, of course, I don't know what move Black played, but he didn't capture on c3. Fine. Do you have any questions? Uh, how do I calculate so fast? Okay, I was practicing with tournament games, with puzzles, and actually, guys, I'm working on a course about calculation skills, about how to improve them. So the course will be released soon, maybe in 2 weeks, 2-3 weeks, I think. So, and then we can make a webinar devoted to this topic. So it's everything about practice. You calculate everything, you keep in mind the position, you try to picture it in your mind. For those who want to get some practice, I have a special video about visualization. Where is it? It's on my YouTube channel. I'll show you. It's one of my most popular. Yeah, this is. So this is the video how to visualize the position properly. How far must you calculate for a sacrifice if you don't see a direct win? Now, it depends on what do you sacrifice. If you sacrifice a piece, I recommend you to calculate to the very end. If it's just a pawn sacrifice, then you should calculate until the moment when you realize that this attack is strong enough to sacrifice the pawn for that. So you get such a feeling that the attack is really strong, and the chances that your opponent gonna make a mistake and you win is good enough. And even if you sacrifice, even if you don't win, you still have chances at least for a draw. So usually it's 5-7, maybe 7-8 moves, something like that. So I would say 5-7 at your level and 7-10 at my level. So don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And one more thing, guys, if you have friends who are interested in chess, also ask them to, or invite them to join the webinar. The next webinar will be next Sunday. Yeah, so like, for example, William did. So thank you for inviting your friends for the webinar. You may also suggest topics for the webinars, and by the end of this webinar, you will be redirected to my website. And tomorrow, I'm going to publish the PGN analysis of these 2 games and 2 examples on my website. So if you subscribe, you definitely won't miss it. Okay, guys, thank you. Hope to